Hi, I'm Amrita,
And I'm Ankita.
and today we're talking about something really serious. Why Crash Landing on You should not have been your first K drama.
Don't get us wrong, we really love Crash Landing on You. It is a great show and it takes everything that keeps an audience engaged. For example, there are all kinds of themes in it. You have a great love story, very unconventional love story at that. So you're constantly rooting for them, wondering what will happen. There's a lot of laughter, lots of humor. There's thrill and suspense because you don't know what's going to happen. It's unpredictable. So in every way, it's really a captivating show.
And action, you forgot how there's action.
And there's action. So there's something for everyone, which is why it's not just one of the best K-dramas we've watched, it's also one of the best TV shows in general that we've watched.
And the reason it's so well made is because they've done enough research by interviewing North Korean defectors to understand what the life is like for a North Korean on their side of the world. So it does not sound fake. They've portrayed both of the cultures in a respectful manner. There's no, nobody's degrading one another. And it's just so well put together that it doesn't get boring at any point.
And the characters are really lovable, whether it's South Korean characters or the North Korean ones. You will easily want to be friends with them or actually even fall in love with them because their character arcs are very well defined and developed beautifully. We're big fans of the show.
And family values, the camaraderie between soldiers, between civilians and soldiers, human emotions have been showcased rather beautifully. We really do adore the show, but
it should not have been your first show. And we will give you a few reasons why.
we've been watching K-dramas for about 2 years ish.
Yeah.
And so when we watch K-dramas, we've been watching it so much that we can tell the difference between someone who has a Seoul accent versus someone who has a Busan accent.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of nuance
Recognizing
that we have picked on. So when you watch Crash Landing on You, you wouldn't have to rely on a South Korean character to tell you how much how different the North Korean accent is. You would have been able to quickly pick on it. You'd be like, oh my god, that's not how they pronounce it down in South Korea. So that was something you completely missed out on. And that was an element of surprise and beauty, which they're so close together. They pretty much speak the same language, but the way they talk is so different. So that was something we thoroughly enjoyed.
That's like the first thing that gets you excited in the first episode itself, and that kind of excitement is unmatched if you haven't watched at least a few K-dramas before.
Another thing is if you watch enough K-dramas, you'd know the three main or common last names that they have: Park, Lee, and I showed the middle finger. Park, Lee, and Kim. So these are like really common last names that you hear in all of the K-dramas that you watch. So when the main character, Hyunwin's character, is introduced, he's called as Ri Jong-hyuk. So if you'd watched enough K-dramas, you'd be able to tell that it'd be Lee, or rather E, how it's pronounced in South Korea. And he was called Ri. So again,
it's
another
subtle thing.
Yeah, but you wouldn't have been able to guess it if you haven't been watching K-dramas before. So you missed out on that too.
And that applies to other words also. I mean, it may seem like a really small thing when we're mentioning it, but we're just giving an example. That applies to so many other kinds of differences in language and differences, in the way they speak that you start picking up on from the first episode, and it really excites you.
So, but if you watch, the more K-dramas you watch, the more comfortable you get with it. So that's
another reason.
And so another thing you'd realize is that the R and L sound in Korean is quite mixed together. So ideally Ri or Lee would mean the same thing, but the way they write it was different, or it was more pronounced in the North Korean accent. So that was another very interesting thing that we learned.
One of the big things about the show is obviously the cultural difference. I mean, the whole point of the show is South Korea and North Korea and two people from these countries falling in love with each other. But the value in the show is the nuanced way both of those are kind of shown, which we've been talking about. For example, if we just take their everyday life, South Korea is quite advanced. It's a globalized capitalist nation, and so it has as much and even better technology at times than Western counterpart countries. And you can see that in their everyday life. Things are fast, everything's available. You literally can cook an entire meal in a supermarket. Versus in North Korea, things are a little different. Their idea of modernization is not the way other nations think of modernization as. And so even things like electricity, food, those are not things that people have
And
access
comforts
to.
of home.
Yeah, and comforts of home. Running water, those are things that are not everyday privileges, and people don't even see them as something that they're used to. So that's one of those things, and that kind of applies to a lot of other everyday life aspects. You can see how different their political atmospheres are, how the government runs and how the security forces run versus how policies and security and just camaraderie among the community is different because of communism versus capitalism. And those things can really be noticed if you've already been familiar with what South Korea is like as a country. Of course, you know the top gist of it because South Korea is in the media a lot, thanks to K-pop and the Hallyu wave and all of that.
But if you've never been exposed to South Korea through the Hallyu wave and you had no idea about it until you heard about the coronavirus and how well they handled it, and you had no idea they were that good. So this show would kind of be a shock to you for both the countries. Like you didn't know enough about South Korea, and now you've been thrown into this whirlwind of information about both the countries at the same time. So I feel like that's a lot to take in. Versus you would have really enjoyed the process of getting to know North Korea through the eyes of a South Korean because you're watching the show through their perspective. So that was another thing that we really feel you missed out on because this was your first show. Another very, very interesting point to note is if you watch South Korean dramas, you'd know chimek is like a part of every like TV show, maybe like a scene between a family, lovers, friends. So chimek is basically chicken and mekju, which is beer. So when you watch Crash Landing on You and they talk about how, there's a scene where all the ladies of the community come to console Yunseri and, they bring dried polak and beer, and she's just like, is that, what is that? So for them, the equivalent of chicken and beer was dried polak and beer. So that was something as interesting to us as it was to Yunseri. So, I think these are small details, but they make such a big difference when you're an actual K-drama follower. Let's not,
And it's moments like that where it really hits you that these are, two very unique countries that at one point were the same and hence share so many cultural similarities. For example, the biggest being language. But there's still so much that has changed in their culture simply because of consequences, and that really hits you in small moments like these, which is priceless to capture. So
it was like, aha, oh my god, the equivalent of chimek is dried polak.
You're constantly making like these fun connections in your head because you have context. As you've been hearing, we've been saying a lot about subtle nuances, and we'll elaborate a little more on that with a few examples.
To start off with, if you watch K-dramas, you'd understand that when a girl or a guy, invites their prospective crushes over for eating ramyeon, that's a hint that they like you. And when that happens between the second leads, it was like when the guy says that, you've invited me over for ramyeon, don't ever ask that, don't ever say that to another guy. And you're just like, oh my god, that's because she didn't get the point because that was not culturally a thing in North Korea. But we could understand the perspective of the second lead, the male second lead, because we know what the consequence of eating ramyeon with your
prospective romantic interest is.
So that was really, really it's subtle, but you would have got it had you watched K-dramas before.
A similar thing for even swear words. I mean, we talked about everyday language, but even the swear words were so different. For example, I think one of the officers,
he keeps selling "Don't tell no porky," and then the main, like Yunseri is like, "What? What
and
do
you
mean?"
also like, what? What does that? What does "don't tell me porky" mean? But it actually just means
don't kill yourself. And you get used to the swear words that like South Koreans use in their K-dramas, because it's part of how the characters are or the shows are made, and it's okay for them to be using those swear words. And obviously the intensity varies from show to show,
but you just kind of your brain gets used to the sound. Even if you still read the subtitle, you know what they
at
mean.
which part they've used the swear word,
yeah.
right? Like, because you know that you keep hearing it again and again and you kind of pick on it. So you learned a new swear word just like the main lead did.
Yeah. Another really important thing that we were kind of blown by was, so if you watch enough K-dramas, you'd know that the most common plot is a love triangle, and that means that there is a second lead who is usually as good or sometimes even better than the first lead. And so within the community of K-drama followers, we usually say this thing, which is second lead syndrome, which means you as a viewer are kind of also falling in love with the second lead's character. Unfortunately, they're called second lead, so they never get their partner, and it really breaks your heart. So in the end, you kind of just wanting some justice for that character pretty much in every show. But on this show, it was a little different, because there were 2 second leads for each of the main characters, and both of them end up having their own subplot, which you would think is kind of forced, because 2 second leads end up together, obviously. But no, it's shown in a really slow, funny, elaborate way, and it really does not feel forced. Even though the ending, I mean, we're not gonna give spoilers.
If you've not watched it, then let's not talk about the ending.
But just the fact that the second leads were given their own story, their own character development, the show really felt fulfilling in that sense, because every character felt like they had a fair chance for finding whatever it is that they were finding. And so again, because of that, now that thing would really hit you if you know the pain of not having justice for your second lead.
But you missed it because you watched CLOY first.
The big takeaway basically is that if you watched a few shows, you kind of are so familiar with the South Korean perspective that when you're watching the show, it's almost like you are experiencing what the character is experiencing. So Yoon Seri going through all of her cultural shocks when she lands in North Korea and is discovering all of these things, you are kind of taking that journey with her, because you know everything that she knows. Again, context. And so it's like a roller coaster adventure for you as well.
We're not telling you that like as a K-drama watcher you know everything about Seoul or South Korea. That's not what we're saying. No. We're just telling you that you have a little more context as compared to someone who's never watched a K-drama. So you get a glimpse into what their world is like. We're not saying that it's the same thing as living there. That's completely different.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people started watching K-dramas during the pandemic, so
which we're grateful for. I think it's really nice that a lot of people's first show was Crash Landing on You in that sense, because you got into K-drama. So we're not even like shaming in any way. If you watched
it, you
watched it.
But anyway.
So if you are someone who's kind of still not gotten on the bandwagon, what are you doing? But if you haven't, then we hope that this video makes some sense and gives you some direction on how to approach this new journey. We've actually recommended 4 of our favorite all-rounder shows here on this channel, so you can go to that video and maybe check those shows out before you go into Crash Landing.
Don't forget to share, like and subscribe.
Bye.